Jane received the news with mixed emotions. Her uncle had passed. A distant, reclusive figure, he had always been shrouded in an air of mystery. Now his sprawling mansion was hers. The solicitor's letter trembled slightly in her hand. It was a place she had never seen, yet felt inexplicably drawn to. In the end, curiosity won. The journey to the mansion was long and arduous. The car finally sputtered to a stop in front of imposing iron gates. As she stepped out, a cold wind whipped around her. Taking a deep breath, Jane pushed open the gates. She walked towards the house, each step heavy with apprehension. The mansion was more imposing up close. As she reached the front door, a sudden gust of wind slammed it shut behind her. Jane stood there for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. She was here now, at the heart of her inheritance. The mansion's interior was a labyrinth of dimly lit hallways and cavernous rooms. Dust motes danced in the faint rays of sunlight that pierced through the grime-covered windows. The air was heavy with the smell of dampness and decay. It was the scent of time, Jane realized, the smell of a place forgotten. She wandered through the house, her footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. Each room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her arrival. The furniture was draped in white sheets, ghostly silhouettes against the gloom. There were portraits on the walls, their subjects' eyes following her every move. Their expressions were grim, their smiles humorless. Jane couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, scrutinized by the unseen occupants of the house. She paused beneath a particularly imposing chandelier. Its crystals were dull with age, but they still managed to cast fractured rainbows across the dusty floor. As she gazed up at it, she heard it. A faint creak, as though someone had just stepped on a loose floorboard in the room above. Her breath caught in her throat, and she slowly turned, her eyes scanning the shadows. There was nothing there. The silence returned, thick and heavy. It was just the house settling, she told herself. Old houses made noises, it was to be expected. But deep down, a primal fear began to stir within her. The grand drawing room was a testament to faded grandeur. Tattered velvet curtains hung limply at the windows, barely able to hold back the encroaching darkness. A grand piano sat silent in the corner, its keys yellowed with age. Jane ran her fingers lightly over its surface, stirring a faint whisper of sound. It was a discordant, mournful sound, like the sigh of a ghost. She quickly withdrew her hand, a shiver running down her spine. As night fell, the mansion truly came alive. Shadows stretched and twisted, taking on menacing forms in the flickering candlelight. The silence, once oppressive, was now punctuated by a symphony of unsettling sounds. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows in their frames. The floorboards groaned underfoot, and always there was the sense of being watched, of eyes peering at her from the darkness. Sleep was a distant dream. Every creak, every groan, every rustle of fabric sent her heart racing. One night, lying in bed, she heard it. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, just outside her bedroom door. They paced back and forth, as though whoever or whatever was out there was debating whether or not to enter. She lay frozen in terror, her eyes wide, her breath caught in her throat. The footsteps stopped. A moment of silence stretched, taut with anticipation. Then a soft scratching sound at her door, like claws scraping against wood. She squeezed her eyes shut, burying her head under the covers, her entire body trembling. The scratching stopped. The footsteps retreated, fading into the darkness. When Jane finally dared to peek out from under the covers, dawn was breaking. The room was bathed in a pale grey light. The events of the night felt like a fever dream, a figment of her overactive imagination. But she knew, deep down, that it had been all too real. Determined to uncover the source of the strange occurrences, Jane began to explore the mansion with renewed purpose. She delved into dusty attics and forgotten cellars, her fingers tracing the outlines of forgotten objects. The house seemed to hold its breath, watching her every move. One afternoon, while exploring a particularly neglected wing of the mansion, she stumbled upon a hidden door. It was concealed behind a tapestry, its outline barely discernible beneath layers of dust and cobwebs. With a racing heart, Jane pulled back the tapestry, revealing a small wooden door. The wood was dark and heavy, the handle cold to the touch. She hesitated for a moment, then, taking a deep breath, she turned the handle and stepped inside. The room was small and circular, with no windows and only a single flickering candle for illumination. The air was thick with the smell of dust and decay. In the centre of the room stood an ornate antique mirror, its silver tarnished with age. It was strangely alluring, drawing her gaze like a moth to a flame. Jane found herself drawn to the mirror. Its surface was clouded, but she could just make out her reflection. Her own features looked back at her, distorted and unfamiliar in the flickering candlelight. As she stared into the mirror, she felt a cold, tingling sensation spread across her skin. The air in the room grew heavy, the silence pressing down on her like a physical weight. She had the distinct feeling that she was not alone, that someone, or something, was watching her from the other side of the glass.